Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. And with this Sunday being Super Bowl 53, it's an opportunity for you to get some skin in the game, the big game, by playing DraftKings Showdown for daily fantasy players. And don't forget about the DK Sportsbook to get in on the action with money lines, prop bets, and more so you can win big this Sunday. Joining me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline to talk about it is DraftKings NFL analyst Pat Mayo joining me. Pat, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's a great week. Not only is the big game out there, we also got the Waste Management Open for golf, which is prime season to get down some money.
Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that because the money I lost with the Saints on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, I made up that money back by betting on the Australian Open. So I don't know what that says about me or about the Saints. So,
did you have Djokovic at the Australian Open?
So I was riding Osaka and I was riding Sharapova most of the way. So.
Okay, so women's tennis is sneakily one of the best sports to actually throw down on because in men's tennis, when you look at the end, it's always going to be 3 of the top 4 seeds most of the time in these Grand Slams. But in women's tennis, you get a bunch of just massive, especially early on, upsets. It doesn't happen every single Grand Slam, but you're going to see some unranked player knock off the 2 seed, and they go off at like 14-1. It's kind of nuts.
Yeah, it is. So let's talk about the big game this Sunday. Of course, opportunity for people to play daily fantasy with Showdown. For those who may or not be so familiar with the DraftKings setup, or maybe people who need a little bit of a refresher, talk about what exactly Showdown is for the Super Bowl.
So the biggest tournament for Showdown at the Super Bowl. It's a $10 entry contest, and first prize, $1 million. So that's probably something you're wanting to go play right now.
Sure.
You can play multiple lineups in this. So what you do, you get 6 slots on your team to pick any player in the game. From the offensive side of the ball, you can pick a team defense, or you can select the kickers. You designate one of these players as your captain. They go off at 1.5 times their salary. Everyone else is the regular salary. You got to fit in all 6 guys at $50,000 of the salary cap. Weirdly, Julian Edelman is the most expensive player in the game. Would not have thought that about 8 weeks ago, but here we are. So you construct your team. My advice for this, and I'm not going to tell you the guy to play because if I knew, I would play it with $1 million. But you want to go with somewhat of a balanced approach. And because there are so many people in this contest, your lineup is likely to be duplicated. So if you have the most obvious picks, so if you have Tom Brady as your captain, you go with a whole bunch of Patriots, you take C.J. Anderson and Robert Woods on the way back, and that's your team. You and probably like 30,000 people are going to have that lineup. So even if you win, you're going to split the pot 30,000 different ways. What you want to do is not use all of your salary cap. That's the best way to make sure that you do not have the same team as anyone else. So leave $1,000, leave $2,000 on the table, and maybe make your captain someone a bit off the board. So if you make like Josh Reynolds your captain and he goes off, you're going to really box out the field because very few people are going to have that. Now, if you want to split the pot 30,000 ways, that's on you. For me, I'd be trying to win the full $1 million to myself. So that would be my strategy. And if it's not going well, there's actually a second half showdown contest also on DraftKings. So if you're doing poorly in the first half, just go at halftime. Instead of watching the Super Bowl halftime show, who cares about the music? Go submit another lineup and get back in the game.
I like that. So speaking of the specific lineup, let's talk about some of the players in this game. You mentioned Edelman and Brady, but what about Sony Michel? That's a guy who's had a big postseason, a guy who's really had a resurgence since he came back from the injury midseason. You know, is that a guy that people can look at and say, you know, that could be a real key factor, not just in fantasy, but also in this game?
I think so. The way that we've seen the Patriots really succeed in the playoffs for 2 games is very short passes, either to James White or Julian Edelman. Maybe you'll see Philip Dorsett sneak down the field, and people just forget about Gronk, and he's open 15 yards over the middle. But it's been Sony Michel, it's been James White, and even a little dash of Rex Burkhead, and even James Devlin thrown in there too. They want to control the pace of the play. They want to control the ball, and they're doing that by running. We've seen the carries for Sony Michel go up and up and up. You can run on the Rams, a very poor run defense by DVOA all season. The problem is, in terms of DraftKings and the Showdown contest, I actually have Sony Michel projected as the highest owned player on the slate. So you have to figure out creative ways to get him into your lineup if you want to. So the thing that I think I would do, if I'm playing Sony Michel, I'll probably play him with James White, because Sony Michel, I think, has 1 reception in the past 6 games. So you hope that Sony Michel monopolizes the groundwork, gets all the goal line carries. They send Rex Burkhead and James Devlin out to pasture. They don't touch the ball. And James White gets all of his numbers through the receiving game. And I think that very few people are actually going to play both New England running backs in the same lineup. So if you do it that way, you can mitigate some of the ownership concerns and really get ahead of the field.
Let's flip it over to the Rams running backs, Todd Gurley, C.J. Anderson. They're looking like a real nice tandem. Is one of those guys you think more dependable than the other right now?
I honestly don't know. I still can't figure out what happened with Gurley in the NFC Championship game. Why so few touches? They're saying it's not a knee injury, but that seems kind of crazy that you give it to big fat C.J. Anderson instead of Todd Gurley, the guy that you spent a first-round pick on like 3 years ago. So it's a bit confusing to me. I think that people will fade Gurley because of this, or maybe there'll be some late-week narrative that, hey, Gurley's the man, but C.J. Anderson's going to be incredibly popular. I think you just don't play him. You bite the bullet. If he's the guy that kills you, well, then you weren't going to win anyway. Todd Gurley is someone that you could potentially go to because of the low ownership, and maybe all of a sudden he's back to where he was 6 weeks ago when he's seeing 30 touches a game and you just run away from the field. But I think that's just a situation I would want to avoid anyway. I think the passing game for the Rams is where you want to look to.
It's interesting you mention that because I feel like this might be, at least from my perspective, I don't know how good of a game this is going to be for a guy like Jared Goff, someone who is as young as he is, going against a guy like Bill Belichick. You know, do you think people are overrating then the Bill Belichick factor for the Rams offense, or do you think the Rams are actually going to have issues? Do you think they're going to struggle? Do you think they can take advantage of things? You know, what is your perspective on the Rams offense versus the Patriots defense?
I think the Patriots are going to sell out on two things. They'll sell out to stop the run because we've seen when the Rams are unable to establish any sort of ground game, it really limits what Goff can do off of play action and really renders him inert because he's not that good. He's not a bad quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. Even if he wins the Super Bowl, he's not going to be a great quarterback. I mean, we've seen pretty mediocre to average quarterbacks win the Super Bowl before. You got Trent Dilfer, Joe Flacco, Eli Manning. These are all teams that got there based on either their defense or some sort of just crazy run. Like Flacco's, it's funny, when you go back and look, like Flacco's been pretty average for the course of his career, to bad even. But during those playoffs, he was just tremendous. It's really one of the weird outliers in Super Bowl history. But with Jared Goff, if they stop the run and they take away the biggest option that the Rams have in the passing game, it's probably Brandon Cooks. It's Cooks or Woods. Now, Belichick might identify Woods. He's more familiar with Woods as an opponent. They've had Brandon Cooks on the team, obviously, and traded him to the Rams. But we used to see Robert Woods in division with the Bills. Robert Woods is a tremendous blocker, which really gets overlooked. They run a lot of plays to his side because he's very good at keeping his man pinned for just enough time to spring the running back, that you could see a situation where Josh Reynolds, one of the tight ends, either Higbee or Everett, I would lean Everett, just they use him more deeper downfield, and then Brandon Cooks would have the ability to get open in this situation. So that's where I see the Rams really funneling their entire offense through. When we think game script, I actually think it's going to be a lower scoring. I think it's going to be a bit closer, try to run, but I don't know how successful that's going to be. So it's going to take a big play or two. And I think that Sean McVay is one of the few coaches that can actually not necessarily out-scheme Bill Belichick, but at least be on his level to really adapt in game. If what the Rams are doing is not working in the first half, you can best believe that they're going to halftime. McVay's going to cook something up to really come out and try to outsmart Bill Belichick, and vice versa. If whatever the Rams are doing well in the first half, I would expect them to not be quite as successful in the second half if they don't also change what they're doing, because Bill Belichick is the master at catching up at halftime and really learning what the offense did and being able to analyze those trends so quickly and adapt. So I think it's a very interesting matchup overall, but I still think that those two guys in the Rams passing game are where you're going to see the majority of the numbers come from.
Pat Mayo joining us, the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget some skin in the game. Download the DraftKings Fantasy app and the DK Sportsbook app to win big this Sunday. You have the DraftKings Showdown for daily fantasy players. And, of course, with the DraftKings Sportsbook app, you can get on the action with money lines, prop bets, and more. So you can win big this Sunday. Pat, you mentioned the kickers earlier, so I got to ask you, if you're making a lineup, is it Zerline or is it Gostkowski?
I would go Zerline just because of you get incremental increases on DraftKings for the length of field goal made. And there's probably, besides Justin Tucker, there may not be a kicker in football who has the distance of Greg Zerline. If there's someone who's going to make a 60-yarder in this game, it's probably him. The one issue is Now, the reason that you could take Gostkowski is that Sean McVay is far more prone to go for it on fourth down from like the 43-yard line, where Bill Belichick is far more apt to kick a field goal from like the 35. So opportunity might lean towards Gostkowski, but I would take the extra bonus of the distance of Greg the Leg, or Legatron, as some people like to call him, because it's a fantastic nickname.
It is a fantastic nickname. All right, Pat, before we let you go, one more time, explain to the audience about DraftKings Showdown and the different options they have, not just with to begin the game, but also at halftime for them to get some skin in the game.
Yeah, so you pick the team of 6, like I mentioned, anyone in the game, offensively, the kickers, or the team defense. You designate one as your captain, $10 entry fee on DraftKings. The first game in the lobby that you can go enter $1 million for first prize. There's also a re-up at halftime of the game. We can play second half only, and of course, the DK Sportsbook app. If you're in the right location, you can go play. And I got some props here for you, if you don't mind. I got a under Aaron Donald sacks. That's playing positive money, plus 140 for him to not get a sack in this game. No sacks for the past 6. And total sacks in this game is 3.5. I really like the under. Tom Brady has yet to be sacked in the playoffs. Jared Goff sacked just once, and he played Dallas, and he played the Saints, 2 teams with an excellent pass rush. And Brady just happened to play the Chargers and Chiefs. No slouch in the pass rush and pressure department either. So under 3.5 sacks on DK Sportsbook for a prop that pays plus 110.
I like it. I like it a lot. All right, Pat. Well, we appreciate your time here. Appreciate you joining us again, folks. Don't forget to download the DraftKings Fantasy app and the DraftKings Sportsbook app to win big this Sunday. Pat, enjoy the game, and hopefully get some winners for everybody this Sunday.
Well, how about this? Before you go bet on the big game, why don't you take some Bubba Watson 40-1 to win the Waste Management? Then you got all the money to play with.
Oh wow, there you go. See a little extra off the top there, Pat. We always know we can depend on you for a little extra at the end there.
Of course, that's why. I mean, I got the show. You need the picks. You subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience. I got your golf. I got your football. I got your UFC. I got your baseball. I got you covered.
Love it, Pat. Appreciate the time.
All right, thank you.